Good afternoon and welcome to the Capitol Forum's 6th Annual Antitrust Thought Leaders Interview Series, sponsored by KL Discovery. My name is Karina Lubell, and I'm joined here today by Anna Kertesz, who is a counsel in the antitrust group at White & Case. Anna, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the changes in merger enforcement under the Trump administration. Maybe just to start, we now obviously have a Republican administration, and with that come certain expectations. And I'm just wondering what changes you've observed given, I guess, the 6+ months that we have had new leadership at both the FTC and DOJ.
So I've been very surprised at the level of enforcement at the agencies, and that it wasn't clear in the beginning whether it would be a laissez-faire approach to antitrust enforcement, merger enforcement, or if it would be a traditional Republican approach. And I would argue it's been a traditional Republican approach plus. So the number of challenges continues across administrations. So Obama administration 2016, there were about 35 over 30 enforcement actions. 2017, similar. 2018 is on track. It's sort of too early to tell, but it's on track for vigorous enforcement. The leadership at the DOJ and the acting leadership at the FTC, and once the commissioners come in, they're all experienced leaders. They've held positions before in Republican administrations. So it's likely that we're going to continue to see a traditional plus enforcement. It will be interesting to see once all 4 or 5 new commissioners come in at the same time. That's huge turnover. Sure. What will happen? But I'm counseling clients to proceed under the assumption that the agencies are going to really scrub and look at deals and leave no stone unturned.
And so how does that, I guess, can translate into the length of merger review? I think I saw some statistics recently that merger review has actually gotten, the length has actually gotten shorter recently. First of all, is that something that you have seen or observed, and what are your thoughts on what might be contributing to that?
That would be great if it were shorter, but in my experience, it's been longer. So, and if I look at the statistics, in the past, it took a few years ago even, it was taking 6 to 9 months. Now it's taking 10+ months. So, and that's a lot of uncertainty for clients. They're out there without knowing whether they can merge their companies, and so it's a very long time. And hopefully that trend will stop and it'll be shorter. And I was heartened to see that the DOJ recently announced some suggestions on how to shorten the length of the merger investigation, such as providing documents early in the HSR waiting period, actually coming in before filing an HSR, and providing information to the government before filing an HSR and working with them. And my experience at the FTC was that parties were already doing that. Parties were coming in early. Parties were working to provide custodians, relevant custodians, and so I'm not sure how much those recommendations will make a difference, but it's great that there's a focus on this and an acknowledgement that there's an issue. Sure. At the FTC, I've seen formal quick looks, which means that once the investigation has narrowed to identifiable issues where there might be an off-ramp, the staff will work with the parties on a timing agreement, and there's targeted document production, and so that can also be a very effective way to short-circuit a lengthy investigation, but that only can apply in certain circumstances.
Okay. I want to go back to something that you'd mentioned about the, I guess, sort of pre-notification process, and it sounds somewhat similar to, or maybe it doesn't, but to what they have in Europe before filing the formal Form CO. And do you get the sense that they're looking to mirror that procedure somewhat, or is this really just an opportunity to give parties access to the staff early and get them the documents or the data that they need?
I think it's the latter. I mean, okay. I think it does mirror the European approach, but here it's just an opportunity to come in to try to narrow the issues and focus in on what the agencies will probably investigate and get rid of the other things. So, and in some instances it can short circuit, because if you provide the names of the top customers and it works out in interviews, then the investigation will hopefully close.
Got it. Okay. whenever we have a new administration, people always talk about changes from one to the other. And I assume, though, that certain things remain the same. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the consistency from the Obama administration to the Trump administration in terms of merger enforcement.
Sure. In terms of process, I think that there's a lot of consistency. The attorneys who are, the staff attorneys who are conducting the investigations don't change administration to administration. So they are going to employ the same process, maybe differences on the margins. So for example, bad documents can sink your deal. I'm thinking of the Crisco-Wesson transaction where there were some bad 4Cs that suggested the parties were doing the transaction to eliminate competition. When that's filed with an HSR, that's a really high hurdle for the parties to overcome. So that's consistent. I think if you don't provide information the government is asking for, that's going to lead to problems. So there I'm thinking of Parker Hannafin, the consummated merger challenge, where the parties from the papers looks like did not provide the documents the government had requested.
Sure.
Closed the transaction, and then months later, customers were complaining, and then the DOJ took another look and saw that the information they were not provided in the initial waiting period would have made a difference to them in the initial investigation. So that's another consistency across administrations.
So, and those are, I guess, more sort of process type consistencies.
Yeah.
What about across industries and areas of enforcement? Have you seen more enforcement in specific industries under the Trump administration that maybe you didn't see over Obama, and sort of vice versa? What have you observed?
Sure. So there's an area where there's been more enforcement is, and this is an area that I'm interested in because I was an attorney at the FTC reviewing oil and gas mergers, and so there's been a lot of retail gasoline mergers recently, and that's new. The FTC was not bringing those a few years ago, and there's been 4 in the span of approximately 1 year.
Oh, wow.
And so there, the FTC is defining the geographic market very narrowly as can be anywhere from by block or within 1, 2, 3 mile radius. So they're really focusing in on these local markets, and that's just a new area where I see enforcement plus happening.
Okay, so it's not so much that the level of M&A in that area has increased, it's more just the focus on those deals.
Yes, it's remedying what they see as competitive effects in these local geographic markets in an industry where they're looking at traffic patterns and natural boundaries to draw lines around retail locations.
Okay. Are there any industries where maybe you would have expected to see increased enforcement or scrutiny that maybe have just kind of continued to slide by?
I wouldn't say slide by. I'm thinking of the generic pharmaceutical sector, where I think the FTC has a process for coming to a resolution, and I think they are continuing to apply that. So there they look at therapeutically equivalent generic drugs and define the market that way, and they generally challenge deals where there's a 4 to 3 or less, and then require a divestiture. And usually the parties, that works for the parties because they're large transactions with very limited overlaps. But even there's been a little bit more enforcement, I would say, because recently the FTC has come out and said that if there's 2 generics that are merging, and one is a pipeline product and one is a marketed product, the parties will have to divest the marketed product. In the past, they could divest the pipeline product, and that's for complex pharmaceuticals like injectables or inhalants. And they did a study and found that certain complex pharmaceuticals, if they're divested and they're pipeline, they never make it to market. So that's an area where it's great to have the transparency and to know that the FTC has made this shift so that we can counsel our clients so that they can prepare for that.
Yeah.
But that is somewhere where it's consistent, but a little bit more enforcement.
And can that be applied outside of pharma? Are there other instances where you maybe have a pipeline product or something in development and an overlapping existing product where the FTC would require the divestiture of the I guess, existing product, or is that really specific? Was this determination on the FTC's specific to pharma?
It was specific to pharma, and even within that, it was specific to complex pharma. So only for these really hard to manufacture products like injectables and inhalants.
Okay, interesting. One other thing I wanted to talk about was enforcement priorities more generally. So obviously we've been talking about merger enforcement and some of the changes, but what about, obviously we've seen in speeches from the new leadership some references to things like behavioral remedies, or a trend away from behavioral remedies in vertical mergers. I'm just wondering what you have seen both through the rhetoric and also through enforcement action that has is sort of a marked change or departure from the Obama administration.
So the whole idea of challenging vertical mergers in court is an expansion that we didn't even see in the Obama administration. So I think the last vertical merger that was challenged in court was like 1968. So this is definitely an area that is a change in priorities, and it's clear from the DOJ's press releases and the speeches here at the spring meeting that they're really focusing on structural, not behavioral, because behavioral is a government entanglement, and so they just want structural remedies. And I look at the AT&T Time Warner transaction in that light. So it is usually vertical mergers, there's efficiencies and there's ways to solve it through licensing, behavioral remedies, through licensing, firewalls. But this is a new approach where that just doesn't work.
Sure. Well, and I suppose it'll be interesting to see, based on the outcome of the trial, whether the agencies continue that approach.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, we're all waiting for that.
Yeah. I think that actually we're out of time, but so this will conclude our interview this afternoon, but I just wanted to thank you. It's been great speaking with you, Anna, and I hope that we'll have the opportunity to continue the conversation. So
thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here.